The first thing outsiders noticed when they neared the Monastery of the Still Breath was the absence of echoes, hoofbeats, drone propellers, even a traveler's muttered curses. All sounds seemed to land on the wind-gutted cliffs and simply expire. Pilgrims described the sensation as walking into thick velvet. Soldiers felt it as a hand closing over their mouths. Few understood that what smothered their noise was not air or luck, but the monks themselves, quiet smiths who coaxed hush into crystal. The world beyond their precipice loved loudness the way a drunk loves fire. After the last oil war, munitions engineers discovered that noise could kill more efficiently than shrapnel. Cannons became choir organs of pain, tuned to frequencies that liquefied inner ears and stilled hearts by resonance. In the fractured territories that rose from the ashes of nations, warlords competed to drown one another in thunder. They amassed orchestras of weapons, howl grenades, bassline mortars, shriek drones. The more shrill their arsenals, the higher they stood in the hierarchy of ruin. None climbed higher than Warlord Keelan Rourke, self-pronounced Lord of Decibels. Rourke traveled with a caravan of rolling amplifiers taller than siege towers, their ceramic horns scabbed with scorch marks from previous performances. At night, his entourage erected a stage of black steel, from which he conducted bombardments like symphonies, folding whole townships beneath crescendos that ruptured stone foundations. The warlord believed silence was the enemy of life. It reminded people of death's mute throat, so he treated quiet as contraband, punishable by saturation sound. Rourke's obsession bred its own nemesis. Rumors reached him of crystals carried by refugees, pea-sized shards clear as winter ice. When pinned to the ear or pressed to the chest, the shards quenched incoming sonic waves, turning roar into sigh. A battalion of his shock troops reported a skirmish in which every blast from their siren rifles had died mid-air, like sparks snuffed by water. The defenders were unarmed farmers, except for the crystals they clutched. Rourke naively assumed a rival engineer had found a clever alloy. He ransomed spies, interrogated prisoners, tortured acousticians. Each spoke eventually of monks in the maw of clouds, a range no army liked to cross because maps went mute there, compasses jittered, and soldiers grew nervous at being unable to hear their own boot soles. Rourke's appetite sharpened. He pictured a throne room paved in captured hush, his cannons immune, his enemies stripped not only of voice, but of hope. While Rourke planned, inside the monastery, a young novice named Leon knelt in the hall of vacancies, palms open above a basin of black water. The abbot of quietude moved behind him, lantern darkened, voice low enough that each syllable arrived like falling dust. "Breathe in the noises you carried up the mountain," the abbot instructed. "Let them settle here in the listening bowl, then exhale emptiness." Leon did as taught. He remembered wind whistling across rifle muzzles in the lowlands, merchants squabbling, a baby wailing in a doorway. He remembered, most of all, the boom that took his father, a pressure wave that rang steel beams like bells until they collapsed. He inhaled those ghosts of racket, and tears bulged in his throat. When he exhaled, only stillness left him, pooling over the water's surface like frost. The abbot lowered silver tongs, pinched the fluid hush, made visible by monk craft as pale threads, and folded it into a seed of quartz, tucked in a copper frame. Over days, the quartz would calcify into a crystal of pure silence, resilient, portable, eager to drink noise. Hundreds of such shards nested inside cedar coffers in the vault below the dormitory. They were gifts for cities that wished to defend themselves and curses to lords who thought chaos eternal. Leon's talent was swift, By the time he was 20, he could condense an hour of unspoken contemplation into a bead no larger than a tear. He loved the work, yet he also loved the valley he glimpsed from the balcony, its rice terraces and smoke spirals, its children attempting flutes. He wanted such places safe. One crimson dawn, a gong that never sounded, did not sound again. But the monks heard its absence. The perimeter wards, threads of negative resonance hung like spider silk across mountain passes, vibrated with warning. Rourke's expedition, armored in bronze and bray, was climbing. The abbot convened the brothers in the scriptorium, where parchment walls trembled faintly with the exile of old chants. "We are hunted," he said without raising his voice. "Yet we must not hunt in return. Our creed forbids wrath. We will withdraw, carrying silence to those who need it." He pointed at Leon. "You will lead the dispersal." Shock cracked open beneath the novice's ribs. "Master, I'm young." "You're quiet," the abbot replied, as though that was qualification enough. Then he handed him a pack-lined box, inside which shimmered 7 master crystals, flawless stones, each worth 1,000,000 lives. Cape-hooded, Leon and 20 monks descended a goat trail nobody spoke of aloud. Behind them, the monastery's prayer wheels froze to avoid even the whisper of spinning. They hoped Rourke would find nothing but empty halls and the memory of calm. The monks moved like low clouds across moor and gorge. Even so, Rourke's scouts were hounds of clamor. They traced the hushed footprints, patches of forest where bird calls subsided for hours after the monks had passed. 3 days south of the cliffs, the pursuit caught up. It began at dusk in a field of broken wind turbines. Monk Fail was keeping watch when the world ahead erupted in blue strobes, pulse lights that functioned like visual war cries. Armored trucks advanced, loudspeakers blaring an amplifier check, thumps and screeches designed to rattle teeth before the real assault. Fail dashed backward, but a spike of ultrasonic sound hurled him into a tower stem. His skull broke in what would have been a crack had there been any ordinary air. Instead, the noise dissolved, stolen by the crystals stitched into Fail's robe. He died with the faintest of sighs. The monks retreated between rusted columns, palms lifted. They tried to broadcast surrender by posture, because actual words risked revealing their number. The enemy commander did not heed gestures. He wore cochlear helmets that pumped combat music straight into the brain, nullifying empathy. They fired concussive rounds. Each round detonated with the potential to erase 1,000 conversations forever. Yet wherever a monk stood, boom collapsed to hush. Crystals inhaled shockwaves greedily, glowing with each fed silence. Leon ducked spores of shattered concrete, cradling the master box beneath his mantle. He saw brothers fall, not from sonic wounds, but from bullets launched in frustration when the sound weapons failed. 30 soldiers with subsonic rifles advanced, sweeping barrels in panic arcs. Monks had trained for this grim irony, that silence might save them from noise, only to leave them vulnerable to crude metal. They were pacifists, but not fools. Scarlet banners of dust flared as the stillness bearers pivoted behind turbine blades, flinging handfuls of microcrystals they called hush dust. The dust hung like mist. Bullets passed through and lost speed, the kinetic energy leached by negative resonance until warheads touched Earth with a toddler's pat. Combat devolved into confusion. Soldiers screamed, useless tactic, because the air refused to carry their terror. Leon shepherded survivors, only 9 now, into a culvert choked with briars. Night collapsed on the field, unbroken by gunfire because the guns were exhausted, their mechanics rattled apart by the weird draining field the monks had woven. They mourned Fail and the others in a circle of silent names, tapping each fallen brother's bead into the ground. Then they walked. Days blurred, dells of damp moss, ravines where river spray glimmered, villages that welcomed them with shy gratitude, and quickly guided them onward before Rourke's fury followed. Each stop, the monks left behind slivers of quiet to embed in school walls and birthing huts. But the master crystals stayed in Leon's pack, heavier each morning with expectation. Rourke, receiving reports of useless weapons and deserters babbling about holes in the world where all noises drowned, howled so loud he stripped gears from his own throat amplifier. He swore he'd skin the monk's silence, grind it, and snort it like narcotic powder. To him, their art was theft, the theft of his favorite toy, racket. He commissioned a device from his most sadistic engineer, an inverse timpani the size of a cottage. It bore thousands of vibrating fins tuned to the breadth of human hearing. When struck, it projected a wall of pure discordancy, capable of shearing mountains, or so the theory claimed. Rourke called it the thunder organ. He mounted it on a tracked platform and pointed its snout toward the route the monks must take to reach the southern communes. Then he rode at its side, anxious to conduct. Leon's party reached the ruins of Old Meridian, an amphitheater whose stone steps had hosted operas before operas turned lethal. Graffiti scarred the pillars. We worshipped noise and choked on it. The monk's guide, a one-armed busker, insisted the dome's acoustics were still strong enough to broadcast a whisper across 300 meters. Leon shivered at the idea. He imagined the place yearning to wake after years of dormancy, to flex vocal cords again. Scouts emerged from the night with tidings. Rourke's column was 5 kilometers out, clearing forest by detonating the trees themselves. Apocalypse marched on subwoofers. Abbot Rowe wanted to surrender. We have done enough. If Rourke faces 1,000 silenced villages, he will realize violence cannot prosper. But Leon thought of Fail's body beneath rust and grass, of orphaned rice farmers. No. Rourke feeds on denial. We must end his appetite. He opened the master box. The 7 crystals nested like small moons. Each held more stillness than a year of graves. It was said that if all were shattered at once, the surge of hush would drive the planet's tides an inch higher from sheer tranquility. Leon proposed a plan. They would lure Rourke into the amphitheater, where the architecture's natural echo would amplify not sound this time, but silence. By aligning the crystals at compass points and a zenith, they could create a dome of nullification so absolute that even thought, whose birth is electrical whisper, might pause. The monks hesitated, for such a dome could kill. Too sudden a subtraction of noise from the human body might freeze the heart or erase inner equilibrium. Yet Leon argued that Rourke had chained thousands to eternal screaming. Mercy, right now, was this: end the chain. They agreed, with eyes wet but steady. Night before the clash, Leon wandered the broken stage. He recalled stories of singers whose final high notes had split marble. He wondered what note silence would sing when finally freed. Rourke announced himself at dawn with a barrage of tympanic shells. They burst against an invisible curtain at the city's edge and dissolved. Confusion peppered his ranks. He answered by ordering the thunder organ deployed. The great contraption settled on its stabilizers, took aim at the amphitheater, and vibrated a test chord that made ravens fall mid-flight. Yet that chord, too, flattened into nothing 30 meters out. Rourke's anticipation mutated to rage. He strode forward, helmeted, cloak sequined with microphone jacks, his left gauntlet a conductor's baton tipped with a contact mic that relayed his pulse to the amplifiers. Behind him, stamped 200 infantry, wearing handheld klaxons for sidearms. They entered the amphitheater through the grand arch. Inside, 10 monks stood with palms touching stone columns. The air felt thick, as if someone had undone the knots of space-time and let softness leak in. Rourke raised his baton. "Bow, and I will let you live to witness the birth of ultimate sound." His voice was urgent static inside the helmet, yet even that grit diluted before reaching the monks. They answered with nothing. Rourke interpreted silence as mockery. He signaled. The thunder organ unleashed its overture. Normally, the report would have cracked bones miles away. Instead, the wave folded to transparency the instant it crossed the threshold of 5 aligned crystals, hidden in the bleachers. The organ kept booming, each strike swallowed. The amphitheater grew quieter and quieter, not relative quiet, but subtractive, as though the monks were mining decibels from present and past alike. Distant towns paused mid-chatter, puzzled by sudden softening. Rourke perceived neither the weakening of his weapon nor the crescendo of hush. His helmet fed him synthetic battle music that masked reality. He marched onto the stage. Leon stepped to meet him. Here was the Lord of Din up close, pupils dilated with rhythms, veins throbbing bass. Leon noted sorrow, that any soul could so fear stillness. It built an empire against it. He held the 6th crystal up to the dawning sun. Light refracted, scattering pale rainbows. "Listen," he said. Rourke scoffed. "To what?" Leon crushed the crystal between his palms. It fractured like hoarfrost. A cone of void rippled outward. Rourke's baton, vibrating with feedback, fell silent. Sensors dying. The warlord cocked his head. For the first time in decades, he heard only his heart, and that too, faded as the dome condensed. Leon drew the final crystal, a sphere the size of a walnut, perfect in every plane. Around them, monks anchored positions. Rourke lunged, dagger flashing. No clang accompanied steel. The blade parted air, in utter muteness. Leon ducked, sorrowful. He placed the sphere on the stone floor at the stage's center, bowed once to the man who had become a monument to fear, and struck it with his staff. Silence, in truth, is not the absence of sound, but the mother of it. An immense, pregnant field from which vibrations are born. When the master sphere broke, the field opened. Everything stopped, not because a priestly trick ate noise, but because the universe held its breath to feel itself. The amphitheater's sandstone, long cracked by sonic tests, mended fractionally as if eased. Soldiers froze, faces softening from contorted snarls to childlike confusion. The thunder organ's fins snapped off, momentum unreleased, their harmonic potential drained. Outside the city, wind halted. Girder bolts ceased their rusty squeak. Beyond, across lands battered by warlords, doors of taverns paused mid-slam. Mothers felt newborns go peacefully quiet instead of wail. Within the dome, Rourke staggered, mouth opening and closing like a fish in air. His internal ear sought anchor and found none. The addict of noise confronted withdrawal more harrowing than death. Tears welled, first he'd shed since boyhood. Without noise to separate him from memory, he heard at last the tiny sound he had chased away. His own loneliness. It was too much. His body folded, aneurysm of the soul. He collapsed on silent stone. A heartbeat later, if time measured beat any more, fissures spidered the dome. Tranquility hung by a filament. Should it remain forever, it could stall blood in every creature. The monks knew the art also demanded release. Leon spoke a word that had no vowels, a shape of tongue and palate practiced only once in their cloisters. The crystal dust obeyed. The silence retreated like a tide. Sound flowed back, but changed.
It entered gently, a cat stepping through a doorway. Wind returned with whisper, not whistle. Boots scuffed, but softly. Survivors sobbed, but the sobs were humble, non-tyrannical. In that new mixture, each note occupied only its own space, not another's. Rourke's soldiers dropped weapons. Some knelt beside their fallen lord, unsure whether to mourn or feel relieved. The constant barrage in their helmets had ceased. One removed his earpieces, hearing for the first time the honest rustle of his breath. He wept gratuitously, wiping tears with armored knuckles. Leon surveyed the stage. 6 monks remained standing. 2 had fainted. 1 bled from the nose, price of channeling magnitude. The amphitheater, though weary, seemed grateful, a theater reacquainted with ceiling fans turning after a blackout. The abbot approached Leon, placing frail hand on his shoulder. "It is done. Yet remember, silence is loan, not ownership. Guard it modestly." In the days that followed, the monks dispersed across territories. Where they walked, gunsmiths converted factories into libraries, because libraries, they learned, were buildings that honored quiet instead of murdering it. Children learned lullabies again, gentle enough that babies slept rather than screamed. Leon journeyed back to the Cliff Monastery. The halls were scarred by Rourke's earlier intrusion. Smashed doors, scrolls scattered, but even ruins sounded serene. He planted a seed of hush in a cracked floor tile, promising to nurture fresh crystals. Not as weapons, he vowed, but as reminders that beneath every gunshot lies a field of potential calm, waiting for someone brave enough to let it bloom. He rang the silent gong, a tradition after victory. It produced no audible note, nor ever would, but vibrations ran along the corridors, stirring dust into brief arabesques. Distant monks felt it in their bones and paused their chores, smiling. Outside, clouds drifted against blue nothing, unhurried, and making not even the rumor of thunder. The world, for a breath, listened to itself and found the sound good.